Hello, America. Hello, world. This is Jake Baker. This is the Baker Report. So, this is a strange new world in which we live. The people of the U.S. love Donald Trump, but the media, the donor class, the rhinos, and of course, the Dems all hate him. So, the battle is setting up. Ron DeSantis and Mr. Ramaswamy have bowed out of the election and have endorsed Trump. Chris Christie, of course, is no longer waddling for the White House and was really never a contender. He just spent a lot of money to insult Trump. Asa Hole Hutchinson has never been a factor. His only claim to fame is being a rhino governor and hating Trump. Trump trounced the field in Iowa. He destroyed Nikki Haley in New Hampshire. She got 44% of the vote in New Hampshire, but there's a caveat to that. About 80% of her vote was Democrats who registered as Republicans, paid for by Democrats to try and stop Trump. So in reality, she got less than 10% of the vote, which means in reality, Trump got more than 80% of the actual GOP vote. Of course, Trump will destroy the field in Nevada. He'll probably get 3/4 of the vote there. And that leaves only South Carolina, Nikki's home state. Well, there, Trump has a commanding lead. And there, he will probably embarrass her as well as he did in Iowa and New Hampshire. Nikki Haley, when you get right down to it, is a self-aggrandizing rhino and darling of the donor class. She's all about more taxes, more government control of us, more foreign expeditions, i.e. wars, and as a friend of the military-industrial complex, medical-industrial, media-industrial complex. Her campaign is largely funded by Democrats, as we saw in New Hampshire, and even her voters are Democrats. And just for the record, the only county in Iowa that Trump didn't win was an urban county with large numbers of Democrats that crossed over to vote for Haley. Folks, that's just low-bred politics. It's old-fashioned backroom, dirty politics, which, by the way, will do her no good in the general election because those people aren't going to vote for the GOP. They're going to back the Dem candidate. So why does she do it? It's all about stopping Trump. Meanwhile, the southern border is completely out of control. We do not have, quote, operational control, end quote, of the border, which is political speak for its complete chaos. Folks, the cartels, the drug cartels, the narco state is running our southern border. Think about that. Human trafficking is rampant. Sex trafficking, rampant. Billions in drugs are crossing the border, and 100,000 people will die this year from fentanyl poisoning as a result of an act of treason from the Biden administration and an act of war against the United States by Mexico. Meanwhile, we have between 40 and 50 million illegals running around this country. Many are from Latin American countries and third world countries, but they're still costing U.S. taxpayers about $1 trillion a year. That means that every taxpayer is spending about $7,000 a year to support illegals while veterans and old people go hungry. So you and I are subsidizing illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, and global corporations to the tune of about $7,000 per working person or about $14,000 a year per working couple. But not to worry, right? Because most of that money is being borrowed. So your kids and grandkids will still be paying off that bill when they retire. If, by the way, there's an America to retire to. But it won't be $14,000 anymore. With interest, it'll probably be $70,000, $80,000 a piece. Now, you talk about the ultimate in taxation without representation. We went to war with England over that very issue. Now, for the cherry on top of this excrement sundae. Many of the military-age men coming across that southern border are Islamists, Mohammedans. They're already telling us that soon we will know exactly who they are as they unleash their fury on the great Satan, which, of course, is the United States of America. In light of that, we have as our guest again today on this week's Baker Report, Dr. Jay Smith, with the third of 4 installments of bringing light to the darkness of Islam. Dr. Smith cut his teeth on debating the scholars, theologians, and powerful Islamists of the dark religion of Islam. When this is done, folks, you'll not only understand Islam, you will see that despite its haunting, even frightening specter, is an empty house with nothing but lies and deception. Our guest today has his doctorate in polemics, and his area of study is the dismantling of the illusion of the global religion of Islam. He's a gifted scholar, teacher, college professor, and most importantly, is a tireless warrior in this epic battle of light versus darkness. Now, from this day on, you will understand Islam and how to defeat it as never before. This is a time of great spiritual awakening. And I can't thank our guest, Dr. J. Smith, enough for the courage and vision he has shown. So, what good is all of this to all of us? I mean, what good does it do us to know how empty Islam is and what an absurd and empty religion it is? Well, it's important to know because it helps us define our enemy and know who he is and what drives him or her. If they can fall for a religion that is this hollow, this absurd, you know that these people are little more than an angry mob. And as we all know, mobs are a very dangerous thing. Mobs can be driven to dangerous, violent extremes very easily. Now, add to this the fear that even non-radicalized Mohammedans face, and they can be driven not only, if not to violence themselves, but at least to say nothing about the violence and refusing to either condemn it or in any way try and stop it. In fact, fear of retaliation against them or their families will drive most of them to actually help the vengeful, radicalized faction within their community to bring violence and jihad to the United States. So we'll take a short time out, and when we come back, we'll talk about all of that with Dr. J. Smith, with the understanding that we are going to learn a lot about the enemy within, who will soon, maybe very soon, be the Islamist next door who's trying to kill you. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Several months ago, my wife of about 40 years, Katie, became desperately ill. She was bedfast, could barely speak, and even breathing was exhausting. We saw specialists after specialists who had no idea what was wrong, and the best they could do was give her drugs from Big Pharma, probably made in China, so she could die more comfortably. But I didn't want surrender. I wanted to bring shock and awe to whatever this was, and by the grace of God, I was led to Dr. Houck, affectionately known as Pappy. He put her on an all-natural formula that he developed over 30 years that declared war on disease, toxins, viruses, bacteria, heavy metals, and parasites, which I'm told are the root of about 90% of all illnesses, including liver, kidney, lung, and heart problems, as well as dementia. Well, within a couple of weeks, she was up and about, and within about a month, she was back to normal and asking me to take out the garbage. That's when I knew I had to bring this formula to everyone who wanted preemptive wellness and to those who were desperate to find their road back to wellness again. So I created Sanus One for the Wellness and BioCleanse formula. Obviously, no medicine can heal you, but our Wellness and BioCleanse formula attacks all those things that are crippling your immune system. It's designed to clear them out, and that allows your immune system to do what it was designed to do: heal your body. I am 100% convinced that this works. It gave me my Katie back. I'm looking forward to discovering whatever is in the path ahead of us with Katie by my side for years to come. So, today, right now, you need to protect your wellness or find the road back to wellness with our one-of-a-kind Sanus One Wellness and BioCleanse formula. You cannot get this unique, bio-sized formula anywhere else in the world. Visit our website at sanusone.com. That's sanusone.com.
I don't know about you, but I'm constantly searching the internet, YouTube, and Rumble for something to watch that will give me news and events. But I really want more than that. I want to know what it all means. I want to know what's going on behind the scenes, and I'm looking for something that'll tell me how all of this relates to the times and the unfolding of Bible prophecy. I can find news, I can find preaching, but finding someone who can put it all together has been frustrating. But a few weeks ago, I stumbled across the Baker Report with Dr. Jake Baker. He has Glenn Beck passion, the insight of a Rusher Tucker, and a prophetic understanding like a Jonathan Cahn. Such a refreshing find. His program comes out every Friday afternoon, but the archives are available anytime at rumble.com. Then search for his channel, The Baker Report. That channel again is The Baker Report. It is amazing.
So, you need a simple video to tell people about your business, educational institution, or nonprofit you run. But, you talked to one of those production houses, and they said it was going to cost way more than you ever imagined. Well, like many of you, we're independent business people and we understand what it takes to run a business or raise funds for a charitable organization, and we're here to help. Whether it's an effective email campaign, a video, short or long, or just a commercial for radio or television, we can help. Need a ghostwriter or help with a webinar? Yep, we can help with that too. Need copy for a website? Article for publication or adfomercial? We've got you covered. If you need it, we can help, and we'll keep your budget in mind as well. So visit our website at elitepowerpros.com. That's elitepowerpros.com, and relax, help is on the way.
That's basically where Islam began. It began as a rejection of Christianity, a rejection of the divinity of Jesus, a rejection of the Trinity, and a rejection of his sonship. And then it became a political force that needed to not only have a theological base, but needed to be a political force against the Byzantines. So that's why the Dome of the Rock had to be built, as a polemic against both the Byzantine Christianity and also as a political gesture, saying, we now control your pilgrimage routes, both Jews and Christians. But once they'd done that, they then had to put together their own book, and then they had to put together their own prophet in order to have a prophet in the line of Ishmael. That's why Muhammad then got chosen, not as Jesus, because they had taken out Jesus' name out of all the texts and replaced it with Nabi, or Rasul. Then they made Muhammad that prophet. Once they had the book, once they had the man, they needed a place. And that's why Mecca was chosen. But that's why you can't find any reference to Mecca prior to the 7th century at all. And the first time we see it referred to is not till the 8th century. So now you have the book, The Man and the Place. Here's the problem. Once you got the book of The Man and the Place, then the Abbasids come along. They're the ones that defeat the Umayyads in 749. They are the ones that really created Islam as we know it. But it took them 70 years to even begin to do that. It took them 70 years. It took them up to 833 to finally write down the biography of this prophet of theirs. And even then, they didn't have the sayings. That took another 40 years. So it took a good 120 years before they got the sayings down. And then they had 6 different compilations, all of which were contradictory. And then, of course, they had to make sense of the Quran that had been put together in the 8th century. It was all over the place. So they had to start the tafsir. And that was done in the 10th century. So once you have the book, The Man and the Place, then you've got to get the backstory. And the backstory took another 70 to 100 to 200 years to put together. That's exactly how a religion made by man begins. So you can see, just by unpacking it historically, by looking at the coins, by looking at the inscriptions, by looking at all the manuscripts that are on the ground, you can follow the evolution of Islam as it began. It was really, as from your first question, it was begun as a rejection of everything you and I hold to be dear.
Interesting, isn't it, that when you look at Islam, it's not just a patchwork quilt, because a patchwork quilt has at least order and design. The edges meet, the pieces fit, etc. The problem with Islam, and particularly the Quran, is none of that takes place. Still, the contradictions exist. Still, the war, even within Islam, exists on its religious tenets. So they not only are they fighting Christianity, not only are they fighting all the other religions of the world, they're fighting within themselves for power, because the two houses, you're either the house of Islam or the house of war. But now beyond that, it isn't just the house of Islam, it's being in the right house of Islam even.
Absolutely. And this is one of the big problems. Once you have a religion that's made by man, it has all the weaknesses of man that's built into it, which includes all the factions. That's why it's not surprising, Jake, that we do see all these factions warring with each other. In fact, Islam has, who's that author in 1996 who wrote The Loss of Civilization? Oh, what's his name? Anyways, he's a Harvard professor. He wrote this book Clash of Civilization is what it's called. Let me look it up while I'm talking. So he writes this book called Clash of Civilization, and in that he mentions that if you look at Islam, this is 1996. He wrote this, and he said, if you look at Samuel Huntington, do you know that name?
Yes, I do.
Samuel Huntington, get the book if you don't already have it. And for those who are listening, go ahead and get it. Clash of Civilization, Samuel Huntington. It's been, he wrote it in 1996, and then he did another edition in 2011. He wrote, and he said, when you look at the 20 wars that exist around the world in 1996, 18 of them include Muslim countries. And he says, look at those wars in the Muslim countries, 18 out of 20. They are all either having he says, Islam has bloody borders. He says, either it's in conflict with itself internally, with other groups inside, or it's in conflict with its neighbor. Every one of them. And he says, in 2021, the 21st century is going to be a clash of two civilizations, Islam against everybody else. And aren't we seeing that come to fruition?
Yes, we are. Very clearly.
Every country where Muslims are immigrants, what's the first thing they do? They leave Islamic countries where everything is falling apart and everything is in disrepair. And they come to the West. They come to Britain and to Germany and to France, now here to the United States. And the first thing they do is they set up a mosque, right? But a mosque is much more than a church is. A mosque is a place where you come not only to pray 5 times a day, but it's also where you come for the khutbah on Friday. It's where you come to memorize the Quran. It's where you come to meet other Muslims. It's where you come to settle all your disputes. It's also where you come to make all your financial what is the word I'm looking for? Make your financial agreements. So it takes on a huge responsibility that the church doesn't. We don't do any of that in the church. We separate the church and state. Islam brings the two together. So the mosque becomes a center for Islam, especially in a foreign environment like here in the United States. And so once they start that, then they start looking for political power. And that's why they always try to gain political power. And they're doing the same thing here in America. And once they get political power, then they introduce Islamic law, Sharia law. And there's a whole evolution. You can see this happening country after country. It happens almost, the litmus is there. Because this is exactly what you see in the Quran. And it's verse after verse after verse that supports exactly what they're doing. But how many people in the West have read the Quran? They're not even aware of what it's saying.
And it's the blueprint never changes. I mean, look at Dearborn in Michigan. It's move in, mass, take over, establish your political power, and then begin branching out from there.
Yeah, and I think Dearborn is probably not the best example because that's only one group, and that's Yemeni Muslims, and they're not. In fact, we were finding out with Dearborn, they're actually becoming quite westernized. There's other ones that are much stronger. You go and see what's happening over in Los Angeles amongst the Pakistani in the Indian and Bangladeshi community. They're much more powerful than the Dearborn Muslims. It's just the Dearborn Muslims are the most, because they're such concentrated in one place. And they have their streets. Everybody thinks that's the center of Islam. No, I've been to Dearborn many times, and I go to Los Angeles all the time. It's much more powerful in Los Angeles or in Wisconsin with the Somali community, much stronger there. And so we do have other places that are Muslims that are actually doing a better job at bringing Islam in than Dearborn. In fact, Dearborn is not a missionary work at all. I don't know of hardly any Dearborn missionaries. Dice, they call themselves Dice, who are actually pushing Islam out on others. They're doing just the opposite. They're just hunkering in. The problem is there are so many missionaries in Dearborn that it has become a real clash, and that's why you hear about it, because the clash of there's so many missionaries descending on Dearborn. Because the belief is that's where all the Muslims are. No, they're not. That's just where the one concentration. And you know why they're all in Dearborn. It's because of Henry Ford. He brought them in there because he hated Jews as a thumbing your nose at the Jewish community to work. So he brought them just from one community and a very nascent and also a very non-missionary minded community. So there are many problems here in the United States. But it's I come more from Europe. Europe's way beyond what America is. America is still strong yet. We don't have the problems that Europe has, and hopefully we never will have them. But we need to look and see what's happening in Europe so we don't repeat those problems.
Let's talk about Muhammad himself. where he came from. How did he get in the picture? How is he the root of this story?
He isn't. He didn't exist.
He didn't exist.
That's a quick conversation.
Right.
How do I know that? Show me one reference to him in the 7th century. Show me one reference to him in the 8th century. Now remember, there are many references to Muhammad. You have Thomas the Presbyter referring to him in 634. But look what he calls him. Mahmud. M-H-M-T. That's a Persian spelling. And look where he places them. He's a Lahmid. Lahmids, look where the Lahmids are. They're in Iraq, up where Tikrit is, Mosul is. That's over 1,000 miles further north. So that Mahmud is way up in Iraq. You have the writings of Sabaeus, who refers to another Muhammad, but he's way over, amalgamating himself with the Jews, 12,000 Jews attacking the Byzantines. When did Muhammad ever join with the Jews to attack the Byzantines? When did he ever live that far north? Every one of the Muhammads in the 7th century have them either in Gaza or in Damascus or north of the Sea of Galilee or way over in what is today Baghdad. That's not the Muhammad of Islam. The Muhammad of Islam was in Mecca, Medina, 1,200 miles further south. What's more, look at those Muhammads. They are all the praised one. The praised one is a common name. It is a title. It's not a name at all. And the praised one can be traced right back, all the way back to 1400 BC, where you have it referred to by the Phoenicians, referred to Muhammad as the praised one. It is then be brought into Hebrew. Hebrew uses it in Song of Songs 5:16. Oh, the one, the lovely one, the anointed one, the praised one in Hebrew. That's what it means in Hebrew. By the time this word, the praised one, is then introduced into Syriac and then amalgamated into the text itself, by the 4th century AD, the Muhammad becomes Jesus Christ. Look at the text. Look at the Syriac references to Muhammad. Look at the coins. Look at Muawiyah, who is a Christian, well-known Christian. He's the first caliph of the Arabs. In 661, he comes to power. So now we're in the 7th century. He comes to power in Damascus, and he coins coins with his image on it. Look at the coins with his image. He has a cross above his head. He's holding a cross. On the back side of the coin is the word Muhammad. How could Muhammad, the praised one, be a Christian? Would any Muslim have a cross above his head and be holding a cross?
Yeah, I was going to say, the mere fact that the cross is there tells you all you need to know.
Bingo. And see, this is a coin. Coins are made out of metal. Metal made out of copper. Copper coins do not disintegrate, don't deteriorate. That's why they're such great things. I've got one right here. We've just moved in this house. I have to get it out. Otherwise, I'd show you right now. I have one of these coins by Muawiyah. And then he has this great inscription on the dam of Taif, where he has it written in Greek. Why is he writing in Greek if he's a Muslim? Because that is the language of theology. And he writes there, he puts his name there, Muawiyah, the servant of Allah. Now, Allah is the name for God in Arabic. So now he changes it to Arabic. Now, who uses Allah as their God? Well, Christians call God Allah. Jews call God Allah. Zoroastrians call God Allah. Pagans call God Allah. Everybody who's Arab uses Allah. It's a generic name. Just like God in English is generic. Everybody can use the word God, right? Including Muslims. So Allah is not the Islamic God yet. He is generic God. So he is the servant of Allah and leader of the faithful, of the believers. Who are the believers? Look at the top right-hand corner. There's a cross up there. So it's obviously he is the leader of the Christians. All right? So yet, if you look on the Islamic traditions, he is the first of the Islamic Umayyad Caliphate. He is a strong Muslim. Not according to the coins, not according to the inscriptions. So where is there anything written about Muawiyah being a Muslim? One reference from the 7th century. And he rules from 661 all the way to 680. So when you see the coins and the inscriptions, when you look at the material that's on the ground, that it still exists today, this has nothing to do with Islam. This Muhammad that you're referring to is a man that was much further north. He was the praised one. He is on the coins of Muawiyah to show that he's Jesus Christ. So when does the Muhammad of Islam introduce? That's not introduced until about 730 when you have John of Damascus. And here's the great thing about John of Damascus. He's living in the caliphal courts there in Damascus. He is from Damascus. So he's right there with the caliphs, right? But the caliphs, Abdul Malik, he was there with Abdul Malik. He was there with Al-Walid. So he was right there in their courts watching what they were doing. And they were starting to put together an anti-Trinitarian book. And he refers to it in his book called The Heresy of the Ishmaelites. Notice he uses the word Ishmaelites, not Muslims, right?
Right.
Heresy of the Ishmaelites, written in 730. Read it. Look and see what it says. And it refers to Muhammad, this man Muhammad. So now he's becoming a character. Now he's becoming a man. Instead of a title, it's now being placed to a man, Muhammad. But look at what he says. This Muhammad, who writes odd things that don't make any sense, who has 4 books. Look at the name he gives to the book. The book of the cow. Well, that's Surah 2 in the Quran today. That's chapter 2 in the Quran today. The book of the women. That's chapter 4 in the Quran today. The book of the table, that's chapter 5 in the Quran today. And then the book of the camel, that's chapter 0. There is no book called the camel in the Quran. And this is the book that he's put together. 4 books of 114. There's 114 books in the Quran. So this is not the Quran of today, right? We're in 730 now. This is 100 years after Muhammad supposedly died, and yet there still is not a Quran that's made up of 114 books. It's made up only of 3 books, the 3 of the first 5 books in the Quran, and one of which does not even exist. What does this tell you, Jake?
Yeah, when you begin shaping the picture again, you see the book and a theology that is a patchwork quilt from hundreds of sources, none of which are in concurrent agreement. You've got a religious founder who didn't exist, who, like the book, was a patchwork quilt of characters reassembled into a guy as opposed to a title. So all the way through, you see the historic erosion of what we now call Islam.
There you go. Can you then understand why, if you just look at what's happening on the ground, you can start putting it all together? But isn't that what history's supposed to do? Isn't that what historians are supposed to do?
Yeah, in fact, that is the job of the historian, is to look back and say, okay, let's follow the breadcrumbs from where they start to where they end, because history is not just a timeline, it's the why and the what behind the timeline. And that's the job of historians, to point that out. And when you begin getting into the understanding of the patchwork quilt that is the Quran, the understanding of the creation of Muhammad from what really amounted to a series of pieces that you pick, and personalities you pick apart to form this almost cartoonish character of Muhammad, that is what history tells us about Islam.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, in some ways, what we're doing, Jake, is probably the most devastating material in the world. Because notice as soon as you said, tell me about this Muhammad, I said, well, he never existed. You kind of looked at me kind of blankly. And your first expression, should we be saying that on radio? And that's the problem many Christians have, and many other people. They don't want to say something as controversial or confrontational as that. So I usually put it in a question. I said, okay, so you believe Muhammad existed. Prove it. Just 2 words. Prove it. Show me one reference to him. Now remember, not the Muhammad in the north. I want the Muhammad in the south. Show me one reference to your Muhammad living in a place called Mecca in the 7th century and receiving a book called the Quran. One of those 3 things. Just show me one of those 3 things from the 7th century. Don't waste my time with the 9th and 10th century. Those are nothing more than redactions. I want something from the 7th century. By just asking that question, who do you think is going to win the debate?
Right. Yeah, and talk about Mecca. Mecca of supposedly the early 600s.
There is no Mecca.
Kind of hard to talk about it, isn't it?
Show me one reference to Mecca at all before 741. The first reference we see to Mecca is in the Continuata Byzantia Arabica, which is a Greek document written in 741, and it places Mecca in southern Turkey. So even the Mecca it refers to is in the wrong location. It's up by Haran in southern Turkey. Can you see a problem there?
Yeah, and even the trade routes would have eliminated a city like Mecca, right?
You can't have a trade down to a city. Now, remember, the trade route we know pretty well because we know there are many references to the cities on the trade route, and they were nothing more than hamlets. And they start in Aden in the south, and they go up to Sana, and then to Najran, and then to Taif. And then from Taif, they go up to Yathrib, to Khaybar, to Tabuk, and then up to Gaza, Petra, and then Gaza in the north. So that's the trade route. That trade route is well known, because the Greeks referred to it, the Romans referred to it. There's reference after reference after reference to these towns along the trade route. But take a look on a map and you'll see where this trade route is. It's all up on the Western Plateau. It follows the Western Plateau of Arabia. Now, what's interesting is these are all well known. What's missing in that trade route? Mecca is missing. Mecca is between Taif and Yathrib. But it's not on the Western Plateau. Look on a map and you'll see it's off the Western Plateau, 3,000 feet down. Off the plateau. About halfway between Taif and what is today Jeddah. But Jeddah's not on any map either. There's no reference to a place called Jeddah. Isn't that interesting? So neither Jeddah or Mecca are found in any map. Neither Mecca or Jeddah are found on any inscription or in any reference. There is no reference to either of these two cities, yet they are the two cities that are absolutely needed today. They are two of the four largest cities in Arabia today. And Jeddah is needed for Mecca. Mecca cannot survive without Jeddah. Mecca needs water. Jeddah has water, but not water from its wells. It has desalinated water, all of which were made and built by Americans, Bechtel Corporation. So even Jeddah had to be created so that Mecca would be survived. And the reason why, they needed a port so that boats could bring in water and bring in food for the pilgrims. So even Mecca is an artificial city. But in the 7th century, there was no Mecca because there was no reference to any place called Mecca. Don't just start with the 7th century. Go to the 6th, 5th, 4th, go all the way to the 2nd century AD. And Dr. Patricia Corona, who reads and writes 15 languages, did exactly that. She was the one who actually did what the Muslims should have done. Now, she was a linguist. There aren't many people in the world who can read and write 15 archaic languages. She is unique in the world. And that's why at Cambridge, at Oxford University, at head of department, she decided to ask this question about Mecca that you just asked. Let's see if we can find Mecca. She couldn't find it anywhere. She went to all the Akkadian documents. She went to the Arabic documents. She went to the Syriac documents. She went to the Ethiopic documents. She went to every language she could find, Nabatean Aramaic documents. She could read and write them. No reference to Mecca. She went to all the empires. She went to the Assyrian Empire, the Roman Empire. She went to the Persian Empire. She went to the great empires of the north. No reference to Mecca. So then she went to ones that are closer. She went to the Nabatean Empire. She went to the Hammurites. She went to the Odyssites. She went to the Ecurites. She went to the Abyssinians on the other side of the Red Sea. No reference to Mecca whatsoever. Couldn't find one reference anywhere to Mecca prior to the 8th century at all. So then she went to the maps. Well, there weren't no maps back then. So she went to Ptolemy. Ptolemy, who was the great geographer, who wrote about the geography of Arabia. And remember, he was writing in the 2nd century. And when he was writing, the Romans had already delineated that there were 3 Arabias. There was Arabia Petraea, which is the northern part of Arabia, and that's where all the people lived. Why? Because there was water up there. Where there's water, there's food. Where there's food, there's people. The people are town, cities, civilizations, history. That's why you need to have water, to have history, to have people live there. That's called Arabia Petraea, because Petra was the capital of Arabia. So Arabia, whenever you see in ancient documents, whenever they have the word Arabia, it's not Saudi Arabia, it's northern. It's what is today Jordan and Syria and what is today Israel and Lebanon. That's Arabia, okay?
Dr. Daniel Taylor is a specialist with 40 years of experience in examining bodies. In almost 90% of cases, he reports finding terrible parasitic infestation. These deadly parasites often live in the lungs, heart, liver, even the brain. Their colonies inhabit internal organs, and the larvae feed on the tissues of living people. That's why Sanus One created our one-of-a-kind wellness and BioCleanse formula that attacks disease and parasites that can cripple your immune system and destroy your vital organs. And their toxic waste can paralyze or impede your entire system. Our Sanus One formulas are designed for preemptive wellness and can bring dramatic results even for post-parasitic infestation. Protect your health and feel good again with Sanus One, Wellness and True Health Formula. Visit us at sanus1.com. That's sanus1.com.
For years, I listened to the Baker Report. It was cutting edge, and his rants, priceless. Now he's back and just as outspoken, and even more penetrating on the confluence of history, headlines, and prophecy. Check right here every Friday for the latest release of the Baker Report. Here's what some of his viewers had to say.
Wow, I'd forgotten how much I missed the Baker Report. Just hearing that voice made me happy.
Classic Baker Report. Fabulous. Just fabulous.
Jake gets it. It's headlines, history. It's about the unfolding of prophecy. The perfect way to end the week and start the Sabbath. Love it.
Join Dr. Jake Baker every Friday afternoon for the Baker Report. And don't forget to hit the like button. Then subscribe and tell a few hundred of your closest friends that the Baker Report is back every Friday afternoon on Rumble.
You finally took the plunge and started that video blog, or podcast. And it looks great. So you go down the checklist. 1. You talk about lots of important stuff. 2. The set looks incredible. 3. You are already lining up amazing guests. 4. Wait, what's 4 again? Oh right, you need viewers. You know, people to actually watch the videos you're uploading. Those people that make it possible to monetize your podcast or video, or bring in customers. So, how do you get viewers? Well, you can hire some big ad agency, but to them, you are still just a small client. You can call every member of your family, and their families, or you can contact Elite Power Pros. We'll tailor a custom plan that meets your needs, finds your audience, and keeps your budget in mind during the whole process. Visit us today at elitepowerpros.com. That's elitepowerpros.com.
One must operate in absolute blind faith. If one uses any form of logic, Islam is a dead religion, but ignorance is a prerequisite for any religion that promotes the violent murder of non-adherents. But Islam is not a religion alone. It's a political, economic, cultural, and religious cult that thrives on blind devotion and a sense of victimhood. It is a religion that demands that you die for Allah, as opposed to Christianity, where Yahweh sent his son to die for us. It's also important to remember that a few thousand Islamists invaded Israel and caused the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. The attack left in its wake murdered families. Some were shot, some burned alive, others beheaded. Babies were murdered, beheaded, and their bodies were burned. Hostages were taken, some were murdered, some tortured, some women raped and sodomized. Others were dragged naked through the town as a form of humiliation before they were murdered, and then further paraded naked through town to the cheers of throngs of insane Islamists. What kind of people do such a thing? Monsters. Militant Islam is a religion that not only allows, but cheers and rewards the psychotic monsters in its midst. And these are the same monsters that Joe Biden's open borders are allowing to stream into this country by perhaps the millions, but at least tens of thousands. The Biden administration is now suing the state of Texas for trying to enforce the law and keep illegals out. So, under the traitorous provisions of the Biden administration, it is legal to be here illegally, and it's illegal to try and stop those who are here illegally. It's legal to have an illegal sanctuary city or state, but it's illegal to try and stop illegal sanctuary cities and states from giving aid and comfort to criminals, illegal aliens, sanctuaried within their borders. So, Mohammedans continue to stream across the border. How many of these are the type of psychotic monsters that bring unspeakable acts of death and torture and rape to Israel? We don't know. But it doesn't really matter, because even those who are not radicalized that are here in the United States will condone and even help facilitate these same monstrous acts here out of religious fervor, fear of recompense by the violent within their midst, or social cowardice. It's a matter of life and death for their family in many cases, or your family. And if they have to choose between their family or your family, yours is toast. How many Islamists are in this country? Well, we don't know exactly. We know that number is reportedly between 6 and 10 million. Do you have any idea how much damage that could do to the U.S. if even 10% of that number is radicalized? And we know it's a lot higher than that. Sadly, I fear that 10% is just a drop in the bucket compared to what it actually is. If a few thousand could do what they did to Israel, imagine what 1 million or 2 million or 3 million could do to America. Our active military is just over 1 million people. Their numbers are equal to or larger than our standing army. And they're not just willing to die for Allah. Some of them are anxious to get to those virgins they've been promised. So here's the upshot. I believe that all of us, every one of us, should take some common sense preparations. Now, I'm not saying move into a cave, but most people have only a 3-day supply of food in their homes. You need to invest in some storable foods. I don't care what kind you get, whatever kind you think is going to be best for you, but you need to get some storable foods. At least start, if you can't do large, start small. Order a 3-day supply. Now you've got at least almost a week of food. Perhaps a month down the road, you could order another 3-day supply, or a week's supply, or maybe a month's supply. Your goal should be at least a 3-month supply. 1 year would be better. Store some water. You're going to need 2-3 gallons a day of water per person. You'll need to be able to protect your family. At the very least, have a handgun with about 500 rounds of ammo. Better yet, a shotgun. They're cheap. I could go into a lot more detail on this topic. And perhaps soon we'll have someone on to discuss Christian preparation for the unthinkable. To go into a lot more detail. But be prepared. Scripture tells us that we should prepare and not wait until the last minute. Remember, here's what Matthew 24 tells us. But pray that your flight not be in the winter or on the Sabbath day. In other words, don't wait until the last minute. Get ready. It's not faithless to prepare. It says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Remember, the ant prepares for winter during the summer and the fall. Finally, you need to be close, and this is the most important part of prepping of all. You need to be close to Yahweh. Here's what the Lord says, draw unto me, and I'll draw close to you. Humble yourself. Ask Yeshua to come deeper into your life. He says he wants to show you things you can't even imagine. He wants to give you more than you would ever dream of asking for. I don't mean condos and Cadillacs. I mean spiritual insights, the knowing of things that cannot be known, but they can be known through him. But you have to ask. You have to ask him to come in. You have to ask him to take more of you. It is in the asking that the greatness is achieved, the greatness of what he has for you spiritually. He wants to plant that in you and reveal it to you. You'll receive power from on high if you'll only ask. This is a glorious time to be alive, folks. It's the end of all days. It's the end of time. Rejoice. Ask Messiah to come in and show you his truths that have been hidden away, not from you, but for you. That is the ultimate preparation. Deepening your relationship with Yahweh through his Son as a gift of the Holy Spirit. Live life more abundantly, not with condos and Cadillacs, not with money and riches, but with spiritual riches that show you what is to come and how the Lord is going to protect you and your family. How you are to walk the walk in these last days. That is real preparedness. For the Baker Report, I'm Jake Baker. Until next time, good day, take care, Lord bless.